So welcome up on stage, Åsa Beckius, Head of Sustainable Supplier Management at Sandvik. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Martyna Wojciechowska, Sustainable Procurement Strategy at EcoVadis. And we will hear a conversation or a talk between you two in just a moment. But you're joining us today as a team of two, but from two different companies. So tell us a bit about the roles and the work you have done together at Sandvik.
Thank you. Thank you. Should I start then?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Åsa Beckius, Head of Sustainable Supplier Management at Sandvik. And of course, us being a global high-tech engineering company with operations in about 170 countries around the world, 40,000 employees, and with a large supplier base, we need the right tools in place to also manage and measure both risks and impacts in our supply chain, and we have chosen to partner with EcoVadis on this journey.
Right.
It's been some years we've been working together. It's a real pleasure to support Sandvik on this journey. And yes, welcome everyone. I'll have a pleasure to interview Åsa a bit on the work they are doing around sustainable procurement. And yeah.
Perfect. I look forward to hearing your talk. And if you stand here, you take my place here.
Thank you.
And the stage is yours.
And the stage, should we stay by the table or in the sofa? Sorry.
We can, yeah.
Different instructions.
Good, no worries. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining, and thank you, Åsa, for being with us on the stage. You started speaking a bit about Sandvik, but would you like to develop a bit more about your role and about what you do as Sandvik as an organization?
Yes, happy to. And yeah, just to say again, with Sandvik, perhaps it's a Swedish company that many people know, founded already in 1862 in Sandviken, a bit north of Stockholm, so deeply ingrained in Swedish industrial history. We have operations focusing on manufacturing, mining, infrastructure industries, and very focused on innovation, digitalization, engineering. But in my role, I sit in the procurement organization, and I have the responsibility to integrate sustainability into our procurement and supply chain strategic approach and management. So also having worked in the field of business and human rights for more than 20 years, I also have a role as a subject matter expert sometimes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. In this context, I believe it's really important to think about Sandvik's supply chain as well and to have an idea of what we'll be digging deeper into. The title of today's session is to focus on resilient and ethical supply chains. Awesome. How would you define a resilient supply chain, and how would you define an ethical supply chain?
Yeah, and to put those terms into context and to use a trendy managerial acronym, we do live in a VUCA world, which is short for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, a catch-call for it's crazy out there. From the beginning, I think it was a term used by the US Army, but now also incorporated in the business world. So it describes that situation of constant, unpredictable change that has now become the norm. I think we touched upon this previously, but supply chain operations are already complex by nature and quite independent, and VUCA has added new challenges like global pandemic, geopolitical tensions, inflation, energy supply, depletion of resources. This is something that we talk a lot about. And to be successful in achieving that resilient and ethical supply chains, it's not without its challenges. But we need to have different responses to this situation and this reality, and a flexibility into our supply chain management. So a resilient supply chain is one that can withstand and adapt to these disruptions through backup plans, flexibility, agility built into the supply chain network, and to quickly identify these and how to assess those impacts. Alternative sourcing, diversified supplier bases, inventory buffers, robust communication channels. An ethical supply chain, on the other hand, operates more in line with moral and social values, ensuring fair treatment of workers, responsible sourcing of materials, more environmentally social sustainable practices, and taking into consideration labor rights, human rights, climate and environmental impacts, transparency. What is important to acknowledge, I think, is that resilience and ethics are interconnected and mutually supportive. So integrating those ethical considerations into supply chain management, like adapting more holistic KPIs, enhance resilience by reducing risk, building trust, and also, for an example, ethical supply chains often prioritize transparency, traceability, which can then enhance resilience by enabling us to more quickly identify different disruptions. And compliance with regulations, I think, comes without saying also, of course, but also a challenge today. And another key aspect of this is really to build on those supplier relationships.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much for this, because you're touching upon a lot of very interesting points here. I was about to summarize that indeed ethical and resilient supply chain wouldn't be disconnected. That really goes hand in hand. And just as you mentioned, regulations can be seen as a challenge, but probably as an opportunity as well, taking into account that they help us to make sure that we're preparing for resilient and ethical supply chains that will help us to face all those changing environments. You mentioned that procurement become very complex with all those changing elements in the environment. Could you tell us a bit more about what stakeholders you had to engage to secure effectively working on sustainable procurement program within Sandvik?
Yeah, and just on a side note here, I met Per Lars Hans here in the break before, and we actually met. You will be taking the stage later on as well. We actually met more than 20 years ago. I was doing an Amnesty report, and we were actually talking about the importance of stakeholder engagement and dialogue. So it's not a new topic. Rather, all companies know that it's beyond the shareholder engagement. So it entails, for our procurement program, that has entailed engaging with various stakeholders, both internally and externally. So in the interest of time, I think I need to mention a few examples. But internally, it's of course about senior management, as mentioned here before. Obtaining that buy-in and support is absolutely crucial for allocating resources, getting a direction strategically, and ensuring commitment to sustainability goals. The procurement team. The procurement team plays a central role in implementing what we're trying to do, and it's about engaging them in training, providing tools, resources, and aligning incentives. Legal and compliance team, also with the background that we're discussing now. So work closely with them to make sure compliance with relevant networks. But of course also outside of the organization, and I first have to mention our suppliers, that engaging with key suppliers, critical suppliers, is also very important for implementing the sustainable procurement practices. We have worked with suppliers to set sustainability criteria for us, but it's also about for us to conduct assessments, provide support, and incentives for improvement, and to foster that collaboration that many people here have mentioned. Customers, for sure, our customers are also on a sustainability journey. So we invest very heavily in R&D and MPD, such as electrification, digitalization, automation, to support our customer sustainability journey. And those solutions help reducing their environmental impact and to create safer jobs, which is very important for our development. Industry association and different networks Collaboration has also been mentioned here many times. Partnerships. We are looking at sometimes very demanding, challenging situations. So sometimes you need that for leverage. You need it for best practice, benchmarking. And I also going to mention NGOs or non-profits. I think that both Sandvik and other companies can be better at engaging with that stakeholder, but I do think that they can provide expertise, guidance, partnership opportunities that can help us also identify areas of improvement and sustainability risk that we were not aware of.
Yeah, indeed. That is really interesting what you're mentioning and all the different stakeholders. That's just showing how complex the topic of working on sustainable procurement is. I think it's very valuable that you're also mentioning what Sandvik could also work on and highlighting the cooperation with NGOs, which can often be maybe underestimated, but they do bring a lot of value to business, and the strong cooperation can be really a key to achieving a mutual success. You mentioned a lot about engagement with suppliers, with different groups within your organization. If we think about sourcing and procurement, how did you structure your work internally? What are the steps you took at Sandvik to organize your work on related to sourcing, and then anything that you have in place for sustainable procurement practices?
Yeah, well, we do have some things in place, and we are working with that aim of having sustainability integrated into our sourcing and procurement activities and supplier relations. I mean, Sandvik Group, we are spending a large portion of our revenue and our costs with external vendors for direct, indirect material and services. So the procurement activities have a huge impact on our financial result, but also within the area of sustainability, anti-bribery, corruption. So it's very crucial for us to ensure that all suppliers live up to the standards that Sandvik requires. And our requirements when engaging with suppliers shall be known from a contractual perspective or through communication and engagement. So it's about doing it in the key tools and processes that we have. So from procurement policy to supplier code of conduct to sourcing processes, onboarding of new suppliers, continuous and systematic risk assessment, and supplier relationship management to ensure that sustainability indicators are also part of the process and the decision making, more than just cost and quality, and these also, of course, financial indicators that we work with. So it includes, of course, to integrate it in the strategic approach, our sustainable procurement strategy, setting targets, KPIs to measure, follow up, tracking effectiveness. It's, of course, to bring our procurement community along with us through training. I don't think I get so many questions on why sustainability, but I do get a lot of questions on how. And we cannot be all sustainability experts. That cannot be expected, but we, with the right support and with communication and with tools, we can all contribute to the overall goals of Sandvik. So we are on a journey. We're building the cornerstones of sustainable procurement with strategy, tools and processes, reporting, stakeholder engagement, capacity building. But I also think it's about building a culture and a sense of community in this aspect. So, and of course, I mean, this is part also of existing our ERM frameworks, etc. And then we have perhaps more thematic approaches. We have specific programs in place, like for climate, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. We are committed to that net zero journey. We have SBTi validated targets. And even though our largest climate impact is when customers use our products, of course, it's also within the supply chain. We use a lot of steel. we buy a lot of steel. And it's about having that partnership with, in our case, SSAB for the green steel. But yeah, also invest in that product development and new technologies. So, of course, when it comes to our upstream missions, that's also part of it. And in other aspects, it's about recycling, finding the circular solutions. And when it comes to regulation in this area, I mean, we are a large company. We are hit by everything. So, when it comes to regulated substances, also, for example, it's about chemicals, it's about battery minerals, it's different critical raw materials, carbon, etc. So, with a vast and complex supply chain, we still have work to do. Again, it's a journey. We need even more effective strategies to overcome supplier transparency obstacles, tactics to enhance our risk management, ensure that regulatory compliance, optimize sustainable procurement efficiency. But yeah, we're on a journey, and we're also happy to have EcoVadis with us on that journey.
We're definitely happy to hear it, and we're happy to be supporting Sandvik. That's really interesting what you're mentioning on how it's been changing, that you're hearing from your internal stakeholders how to work on sustainability, not why to work on sustainability. As you're mentioning, more and more regulations is definitely putting pressure, adding the sustainability or moving sustainability higher and higher on the agendas. With that structure in place that you just described, how do you as Sandvik feel prepared and ready for the upcoming regulations? That's a lot of the regulations that hits you, that impacts you as an organization due to the industry you operate in, but also the regulation that would impact pretty much any organization operating, which is more like the European Union's level due diligence. So the CSRD, does that sound scary? Does that sound like you're well prepared and equipped, or there's still a lot of work to do?
Well, that remains to be seen, perhaps. No, I think without a doubt that the regulatory avalanche we are witnessing, especially in relation to EU Green Deal, is putting that heightened demand for transparency in reporting regulated substances, etc., is stretching many businesses to their limits. It's balancing short-term with the long-term perspectives. And of course, there's a risk that we spend a lot of time getting reporting in place, finding the right electronic format, rather than spending time on working on identifying and mitigating risks. But absolutely, there's also a positive impact of this, and regulation is a driving force for sure. It helps us to put sustainability high on the agenda because we do want to be compliant with existing regulations. So in terms of CSRD, I think that for Sandvik, it has so far also had a positive impact in the form of, again, we are quite large companies, so it's also had a positive impact in the form of increased dialogue and communication between departments. The DMA, the double materiality assessments, has brought new discussions and real conversations on certain impacts and challenges, which proves the point that sometimes the process is as important as the outcome. And in terms of closing identified gaps and improving, in tracking effectiveness, that will be challenging for sure. But also, again, opportunities to further strengthen our due diligence framework and its approach to responsible sourcing and sales practices. So also when it comes to the upcoming CSDDD, the Due Diligence Directive, I hope that the most significant change there, once it comes into force, will be bringing us and others perhaps beyond that tier 1 compliance and to be doing more tier N, meaningful human rights and environmental due diligence. So obligation more focused on tier N, but in a risk-based way. And again, we need to assess our current practices and finding out where the gaps are. But I think that long and deep thinking on how to address fewer but more complex problems will be needed.
That is really interesting what you're sharing here, and thank you very much for this. I like how you moved from general regulations to CSRD and then mentioning the upcoming CSDDD, which kind of puts us in the context that there may be just more and more. It's probably not the end. We can expect more to come, and that is, I guess, why building resilient supply chains will help organizations to make sure to keep up with the regulations, with the regulatory landscape and due diligence requirements. Thank you so much, Åsa. We're thrilled to work with Sandvik, and thank you for joining us on the stage.
Thank you.